Infrastructure as code. The name is a lot more complicated than the concept is. The concept is actually really straightforward and something that most system administrators wind up doing naturally just as a way to protect their servers. My name is Stephen Marcus, and I want to give you an example on how to implement some infrastructure as code. Let's talk about what the concept is. The definition is automated configuration of servers using software. That's kind of vague. So you're going to use some sort of scripting tool to configure your servers, and then you're going to save that scripting someplace. So you can bust data into two big hunks. You've got data, your spreadsheets, drawings, databases, whatever. You know that stuff has to be backed up, and there's methods to do that. But also for your servers, it doesn't have to be a server, it could be a host, whatever. If it has to be rebuilt, your configuration needs to be saved. So infrastructure as code uses some sort of scripting, configure these hosts, and then you save it. So it's not that complicated of a concept. One of the things that you have to do is once you're doing this, you're going to have to resist the urge to go in and edit your servers manually. Let's say you want to change the permissions on a directory. Yeah, you can go in and do that and see if it works, but at some point you have to go back and put it into your automation so that it doesn't get overwritten. The problem that you have, server maintenance, all the things that you have to do to a server, installing software, adding, removing users, all that kind of stuff. You need a way to do it. You need a way to recreate your server in the case of catastrophe. Or if you want lots more servers, just like the one you have, it gives you a quick way to recreate it. Server consistency. Let's say you have several administrators. Or people who are acting as administrators. You need to have some way to make sure that your server stays the way you think that it's supposed to be and that you can trust that. Change management is another very important thing. Who did what did they do, when did they do it, why did they do it? You need a way to document all that and hopefully maybe even roll it back if something doesn't work out. And speed is the thing that you pick up in a lot of this. If you just have a handful of servers, you can get by doing this stuff manually or using simpler tricks. If you have lots of servers, it doesn't take many to where you want a way to manage all of them at one time, and that's what this provides. So the components, you need a way of running your configuration code. Like I said, Bash will do this. I've done a lot with Bash. It's great. But there are some really powerful tools out there. Chef's been out a while. Puppet is really big. Ansible is kind of popular right now. That's what I'm going to use. You need a method. You need a method of saving your code. Subversion's been out for a while. Git is really popular right now. If times get hard, you can use a USB stick, or let's say you're in a secure facility where you don't have a connection to the internet. You can do a lot with Bash and a USB stick. It's ugly, but it's worthwhile to use some of these techniques. And if you're fancy, you can use a controller. Ansible has Ansible Tower. Puppet has a Puppet Master, and the concept here is that you've got one centralized server that's controlling this scripting and pushing it out when you want it and documenting stuff, and that's a fancier way to do it. So here's my example. I want to create a DHCP server. I've got a sandbox here. This is the 10.10.20 network. I've got 3 hosts. They're all RHEL7, ZZ1, ZZ2, ZZ3. These 2 are going to have static IP addresses. This one's going to act as a workstation. I'm going to install Ansible and Git on it and then push my configurations out to this. This is a blank server that's going to have DHCP on it. It does have a static IP address. All these machines have a user Steven on there. There's my default gateway just for good measure, and when I'm finished with my configuration, I'm going to push it up into GitHub. And I put Ansible.com on here just as a reference, and we can look at that really quick. Here's Ansible.com. It's not a bad website. They've got lots of videos and lots of information. What you're really going to need, though, is docs.ansible.com. When you start working with this and you want to say, okay, how do I add a user? How do I change something on a file? How do I do this? How do I do that? You're going to want to look at the modules. You'll Google it, and when you Google it, one of the first things is always pointing back to the documentation, so you're just as well off to go ahead and get used to that right now. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into this. what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to log into this machine, and I'm going to do it all just as a regular user. Ansible, you don't have to have a client, you don't have to have anything. And while I've come across this is not meant to be a tutorial on Ansible or on Git or on DHCP for that matter. I want to show how these concepts work together. So the point I'm making is I'm going to be a regular user. I'm going to log into this box, and then I want to become root. So here I am. I'm on ZZ1, and I want to connect to ZZ2. So I'm going to become root. Vim etc hosts, and I'm going to go ahead and add 10.10.20.6 ZZ2. I'm going to exit out, and I'm going to become just a regular user. Who am I? Okay, so if I say SSH ZZ2, again, make sure I'm Steven, I'm on ZZ1. I'm going to SSH into ZZ2. Yes. Put in my password, and now I'm on ZZ2. Okay, so I have connectivity. I can get there. I have an account there. Okay, I can start pushing Ansible stuff. It's not really handy to put in a password every time you want to do it. Every time you want to do this. So let's say if you're pushing out to 20 machines, even a small number like that, you're not going to want to put your password in every time. So what we want to do is to generate a public and private key here and push my public key to whatever hosts that I want to. So let's do that. I'm going to say ls.ssh. There's nothing there. So I'm going to say SSH keygen. SSH keygen. There it is. And I'm going to create a public-private key. I'm just taking the defaults for this. I don't want a password specifically, so just taking the defaults works just fine. And if I say an ls, there we go. I've got a private key and I've got a public key, and I want to push that public key over to ZZ2. So a quick way to do that is to say SSH copy ID to 1010. Oh, let's use the. I went to the trouble of putting that in my etc host. SSH copy ID to ZZ2, and it's going to need that password one last time. Boom, that should work. So now if I say SSH ZZ2, blam, I'm in. I didn't have to enter a password. Okay, so that's good. I'm in, but I'm also user Steven on ZZ2. Can I do sudo -i without entering my password again? Yes, I can. And the reason that I can do that is I did go ahead and put Steven, group Steven. Steven is in Steven and Wheel. Wheel is an old group that gives you a quick way. I'm going to say di sudo. And at the very end of this, we can see the Wheel group is in. That means that if you're in the Wheel group, you can do everything as root. And since I just authenticated, I don't even have to use the no password all. So that is what's letting me become root without putting a password. So I'm going to exit back out. I'm still in ZZ2. I am now in ZZ1. And the significant thing I did is now I can go from here, I can log into here as Steven and become root without putting in a password. All right, that's our first step. Now I want to install Ansible. So I'm going to become a root again so I can install this. If I say yum list installed and grep for Ansible, it's not there. So how about if I say yum info? I know it's there, so I'm just going to say yum info Ansible. It's in the EPEL repository, so it's really popular. It's easy to get, so it's not hard to install. So I'm going to say yum-y install Ansible. And if I spelled that right, hey, I did. It's going to install Ansible. Okay, so Ansible's installed. Notice it was no Arc and a whole lot of Python. Well, that's what Ansible is. Again, I want to be just a regular user, and I'm on ZZ1. And I've got Ansible installed, and I can say Ansible and have it puke at me, and that just proves that I've got it there. So make directory Ansible. Let's see, I'm in Home Steven and I created Ansible. This is going to give me a place to put all my stuff. So cd Ansible. There we go. So I'm ready to do business. Now, one of the first things that I'm going to need is my own hosts file that's going to be used just by my Ansible playbook. So I'm going to say vim hosts. And in my hosts file, there we go. I've got a heading of servers, and I've got ZZ2. That's my only machine. Now, if I had 20 servers, I could just list them all down through here, and it would work on all the ones that I have listed. But for right now, I've just got ZZ2. So that's a pretty easy start. Cat hosts. There we go. Server ZZ2. Now, I'm going to create my playbook. And I've already got this, so I'm just going to cut and paste this guy. I'm going to say vim dhcp dot YML. It's a YAML file. So I'm going to say insert. There we go. Again, just real quick and dirty. Even though you might not know that much about Ansible, the way it lays out, it's pretty readable. Work on host servers. It's going to get that from my hosts file. It's going to use sudo to become root, and I've got 3 tasks here, and they're all named. The first one's going to be install DHCP, make sure the package is there. I'm going to copy my configuration file over, and then make sure the service is started. And you can look through all this, and it's all pretty straightforward. The one thing I don't have is my dhcpd.conf file. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to create that. There's what we've got so far. I'm going to make a directory called files just to sort of give it some organization. So now I'm going to say vim files dhcpd.conf, and that is what I called in my playbook. So let's go ahead and do that. This is just a configuration file for DHCP. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it, and there we go. If you configured DHCP before, this should look familiar. If not, just go with me. This is a way stripped down configuration file for DHCP. It does work. Now, the configuration file, when you do stuff with Ansible, this first line is a good idea just to let anybody else know if they come across this. If you edit this, there's a good chance Ansible is going to come around and splatter over what you've done. So it's just a reminder that any changes you make, they need to be made in Ansible. They need to be made in your configuration and then saved. Really straightforward 10-10-20 network. It's going to hand out from 50 to 100. It's got my DNS server. It's going to give it Steven Land. It's got my default gateway, and I've got lease times in here to make it look like I've done a thoughtful job of this. There we go. And I call it dhcpd.conf. One more time. dhcpd.conf. That's going to poke that into etc dhcp into that directory, which is where it needs to be. Alrighty. We're ready to run the playbook now. Let's prove something. I'm still on ZZ1. I'm going to go over to ZZ2, sudo-i yum list installed grep for DHCP. It's not there. It's got some stuff that the DHCP client needs, but it doesn't have the package for server. So I'm going to hop back to 1 again. I'm Steven, and let's do Ansible playbook -i hosts dhcp.yaml. Let's see if it runs. Anything that comes up yellow is something that got changed. So it says it installed DHCP. Remember, we had 3 tasks. Boom, boom, boom. So cool. It's going to say the configuration file is copied over and the service is started. Well, let's go see if that actually happened. I'm on ZZ2 now, And let's just run the last command. Yum list installed. What do you know? This got installed. And if we're lucky, I can do a ls of etsy dhcp dhcp.conf cat etsy dhcpd.conf. Spell it right. There we go. There's my configuration file. Systemctl status dhcpd. It's up and it's running. So, good deal. It actually installed it, it started, and it did everything that we wanted. So, yay. That's the first hunk of what we were trying to do. That was, we have used Ansible to install something. Okay, let's go to our second hunk of this. The next thing is I want to take my configuration and I want to use Git and I want to push them up into github.com. Okay, let's see how we do that. First off, do I have Git installed? Git. Well, what do you know? I do. I could do yum install Git, but it's already there. So let's go over to GitHub. I've logged in. I've already got a an account on GitHub. They're free. As long as you don't mind people looking at your code, you can use it for free, and it's a good thing. So I want to start a project, and my repository name, I'm just going to call it my Ansible stuff. And see, it's public. Now, if you want to pay more, you can use the private, and that's cool too. And let's initialize it with a README and create my repository. And one of the neat things about GitHub is it does tell you how to do all this. Let me back up and do this a different way. I'm going to delete this one. Delete this repository and my ANSIBLE. Okay, here I am on github.com and I want to start a project. I'm going to start a project and I'm going to call it my Ansible, and I'm going to say my Ansible stuff. I'm going to leave it as public, that way it's free, and I'm going to create just a bare repository. There we go. When you create it like this and don't have anything in it, it gives you nifty instructions on how to set all this up. So it actually tells you what to put in there. So we're going to keep that right there, so we'll have it. And I've got Ansible installed, and I want to go ahead and configure some of the global stuff. I'm going to say git init. That's the first thing that you have to do. ls-la, there's nothing there, but when I say git and initialize it, now I can say, now I've got this git directory, and la git, it's .git. You've got a config file right here where most of this stuff is going to land, but I'm going to say git config global user.name Marcus, and git config user.email, and I'm going to put a phony email address in there, steven@stevenland.com. So I've got a username in there, and I can say git config list, and there's my attributes that it already understands. All right, let's look at this guy some more. It wanted to make a README file. You really need a README file just to kind of tell what your repository is about. So I'm going to say, boom. Now I've got a README file along with everything else. And if I say cat README, pretty simple. Okay, the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to add everything, then we're going to commit it. I'm going to say git add, and dot just means, let's do this first, git status. It's going to say here's a bunch of files, they're untracked. So I'm going to say git add dot, and that's going to add everything. And if I say git status again, it's going to say, look, here's all these files that I'm tracking and are ready to be committed. Let's commit these guys. Git commit, give it a message of initial commit. Nice and clean. And it's ready to be pushed up to GitHub. But I'm going to have to specify where GitHub is. So, and it even gives it to you right here. Bing! Git remote add. So I'm going to put that in there. Git remote add. The git at GitHub, this is the SCP way. That's the way we're going to do it. You could also use HTTPS, but we're going to do it this way so that we can just use SSH. And the last thing that it tells us to do, git push -u to enter a username origin master to the master branch. Git -u push origin master. And I did those backwards. So let's try this again. Git push -u master. Okay, that crash means that it doesn't have my public key. I need to give it my public key. So remember, I'm in the Ansible directory. I'm going to back up one. Remember the SSH directory? And my public key is right here. So I'm going to print that guy out. So I'm going to say cat.ssh .pub. There's my public key. It starts off with SSH RSA. I'm going to grab all this and say Control C. And I'm going to go back to GitHub. Settings. Deploy keys. Right now there's no keys associated with it, so I'm going to say add a deploy key. Stephen on ZZ1. That's my key. Notice it even prompts you. It has to begin with SSH RSA, so if I splatter that sucker in there, it does have it. And allow write access because I want to push up to it. Add my key. And let's go back and swing at this again and see if it doesn't make a difference. Make sure I'm in the right directory. I am. So git push origin master. I'm not even going to give that -u. And boom, it pushed it. So here we go. My Ansible, here are all my files. I can look in here. There's my dhcpd.conf, and it's saved. So now anytime I make a change to my configuration, I can push it up here and I have versioning. I can look at my commits. I have one commit. That's my initial commit. All right, let's jump back into this, and just for the sake of argument, we did do a cat etsy dhcpd.conf. Notice I've got an extra comment there that I really don't need. So I'm going to go back to ZZ1, and here's all my stuff. I'm going to say cd files vim dhcpd.conf. I'm going to take this thing out. Git status. Git knows that I've changed something. So I can say git add, start again, git commit -m took out comment. You gotta spell commit right. There's no way around it. Git commit, git push origin master, and it pushes it up again. Now probably what you also would have wanted to have done Ansible playbook, remember -I hosts, dhcpd.yaml. Run that again to make sure what you're pushing makes sense. Notice your yellow is your config file. Let's pop over here just for the sake of argument. And notice that's gone there. If we go here to files, the comment's gone. And I have 2 commits. And my commits are initial commit and took out comment. So this has given us some fantastic versioning. Okay, so what have we done? We created a method configuring a server, and then we saved that method. So the trick that makes this work is every time that you make a change, you do it through your management and you save it. That way you're sure what you're doing and you don't have anything happening out of band, and you're certain about what you're doing. The other thing is to make sure that your changes are idempotent. I'm not going to pretend that I knew the definition of this before I started doing this stuff. What it means is if you run a script, you should be able to do it over and over and over again without screwing stuff up. Meaning, let's say you added user Fred. Well, you run it once, you get user Fred. If you run it a second time, do you get a second user Fred and a third and a fourth? You shouldn't. So your code should be idempotent that you can run it over and over again and things still be okay. So that's our conclusion. Again, I'm Stephen Marcus. I hope this is something that you can implement in your daily job. Thank you.